This week on Forward.
And what got me so interested in the beginning was it just seemed fundamentally unfair that the wealthy effectively had a government-protected monopoly on investing in some of the highest growth businesses. I can go to Vegas and gamble money with no regulations. So why can't I just put like $1,000 into my friend's company who I want to support? For me, it's all about the relationship between the founder and investors. That's what drives the platform. That's what I actually care about.
It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast the founder and CEO of a startup that helps startups, one of my favorite companies, Wefunder, Nick Tommarello. Welcome, Nick.
Great to be here.
So you are kind of a Johnny Appleseed of startups around the country. How many companies has Wefunder helped to date?
Over 1,000. I actually don't know the exact number.
And so for those people listening who've never heard of Wefunder, what the heck is Wefunder?
Basically, it helps startups raise community rounds, letting their customers and users invest as little as $100 alongside the venture capitalists.
And if people listen to the podcast a lot, we had an entrepreneur on who was using Wefunder for his healthy cookie company, which is a good fun. It was super wholesome. And it seems like you were an entrepreneur well before Wefunder kicked off.
Yep, I have not yet had a real job.
Yeah, you're dressed accordingly. No, I'm kidding. And it's one of the reasons why I love your company and love what you've built. But so people listening to this, everyone's had an idea. Everyone's thought, oh, this should exist. And now they're thinking, wait, Wefunder is a way that some people can sponsor my awesome idea. So what are the criteria or qualifications to be a Wefunder project?
Well, Wefunder itself is not a gatekeeper. We don't think it's our role to basically say if an idea is good or not. For us, our role is to make sure that it is compliant with the law. And then the community around that founder can decide if they want to invest or not. If they would like a coffee shop in their town, they can meet the founder and decide to invest. But we ourselves won't judge that. So we actually have no criteria other than being compliant with the law.
And what does it take to be compliant with the law?
You have to file this thing called a Form C on Edgar, which has a bunch of disclosures like who's on your board, who are your officers. Basically, one of our account managers will just guide the company through that over a few hours.
And so the Edgar is the Edgar form is to be compliant with the SEC or the federal government?
There's this federal law called Regulation Crowdfunding, and that requires some disclosures on this Form C filed on an SEC database called Edgar. And we handle all that for you.
And this legislation is relatively new, right? Because crowdfunding is relatively new. And
relatively,
they came up with rules for it. Because I remember there was a period when the threshold to invest in any venture, even via crowdfunding, was kind of high-ish. Mm-hmm. And then it changed, and all of a sudden, new things were possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's relatively new, but basically we started the company 12 years ago. And step one was to basically lobby Congress to pass this
easily
new law.
Done. No, I'm kidding.
That actually was surprisingly the easy part, actually.
Oh, say more.
Well, we mostly had good timing. Basically, I came involved when it was passed in the House and it was stuck in the Senate. And basically, the GOP had this 2-page law that was complete Wild West. Anybody can do anything. And the Democrats had this 60-page law that was just so complex, like no one would ever use it. And
well, take a step back for a second, because I remember this. There were rules around investing in companies generally. You had to be something called an accredited investor, which the thresholds have changed over time, but it pretty much meant you need to be rich. You need to have a certain income. I want to say that, and my stuff's out of date, but it's you needed over $1 million in investable assets or an income that was the equivalent of certainly 6 figures, but even higher in order to be an accredited investor. And if you weren't an accredited investor, then you weren't allowed to invest in just about anything. And some people made the argument, wait a minute, that might not make sense, because isn't it the case that you would want someone who doesn't have tons of money to be able to invest in something that might make a lot of money or be the next Microsoft or give them a leg up. And so there was this conversation around this, like what, and then, but the reverse is we don't want there to be flim-flammers who scam you. And if you have lots of money or high income, then you're assumed to be either more sophisticated or more able to survive if it turns out that this investment goes south. So those are the two sides of the argument, and those are the sides that were getting hashed out in this legislation.
Yeah, to be exact, you need to have $200,000 of income for more than 2 years or $1 million in net worth to invest.
And it was $1 million without your house.
Exactly, minus your primary residence.
Yeah.
And it was relatively bipartisan to want to give more capital to entrepreneurs and founders.
Everyone loves small businesses.
No one really disagreed with that. The main controversy is like how to do it safely. And there's a difference in opinion on how much regulations would be required to make sure that, for instance, grandma won't lose her house, because no one wants grandma investing her entire life savings into like an early stage risky startup. And I think the regulation mostly handled that through investor limits, where you only can invest a certain part of your income or net worth per year. For maybe a middle class person, that might be like a few $1,000s a year. And what got me so interested in the beginning was it just seemed fundamentally unfair that the wealthy effectively had a government-protected monopoly on investing in some of the highest growth businesses. And I can go to Vegas and gamble money with no regulations. So why can't I just put like $1,000 into my friend's company who I want to support? And so we put most of my effort into very common sense investor limits. But otherwise more lightweight regulation so that companies and founders can actually do this effectively.
And so that argument won out in DC and Congress when you managed to get the bill out of the Senate?
More or less. They kind of met in the middle. Like the 2-page version, the 60-page version became like a 30-page law. And it was probably a little bit too complicated. And then the SEC took another 4 years to write about 800 pages of regulations on how it worked. And their first stab at it was released in 2016, and it was effectively unworkable. So we had to lobby the SEC and Congress another 4 years to actually make more common sense regulations. Then that finally happened in 2021, and then we had like a viable business.
Holy cow.
It was a 10-year journey to even start.
Oh, well, congratulations on that. It reminds me of another company, 1-800-CONTACTS, that I'm friendly with the CEO. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it was illegal to buy contacts from anyone who was not an eye doctor. Mm-hmm. And then he said, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So let me lobby. And it took him a little bit less than 10 years, but it took him years. And he went to D.C. every week. Eventually, it was passed. I think it was called something like the Contact Lens Freedom Act or the or something along those lines. Did your law have a really positive name like that? Was it like the Small Business Investment Act?
It was called the Jobs Act to give people jobs. So that's good branding. I didn't come up with that, but
people might even remember the Jobs Act. So then the rules weren't great, and then they got refined, so to speak, by the SEC, and then they didn't work so well, and they got refined further. And then 9-10 years later, now we can crowdfund.
Yeah, pretty much. Businesses. I mean, we've been active since 2016, but from 2016 to 2020, it was like not a very good business. It was very difficult.
And I want people to think about what Nick is saying too, because one of the things I learned in startup world, people sometimes ask me, hey, how did you get the courage up to run for president? And what I told folks is like, look, if you're an entrepreneur, let's say that someone comes to you with a business idea or you're an entrepreneur, you need to be able to invest at least 5 years in it if you're a serious entrepreneur, maybe more like 10 years.
Probably 10.
Yeah, so Nick is nodding because so if someone thinks they're going to get it done in less than 5 to 10 years, they might be full of shit. It might be a sign. So if you're a real gung-ho entrepreneur and you're going after something, the people around you know that they can come back X years later and you'll still be working on it. That's, by the way, a sign of seriousness. So one of the things that I said to folks about running for office, in some ways it's very difficult, very daunting, very personal, and the rest of it. But on the flip side, I knew what the time frame was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
If I start a business, I don't know how long it's going to be, but you have to think at least 5+ years if you're going to be serious. But when I was deciding whether to run for president or not, it was, let's call it 2017. I would declare in 2018. And so then I knew I would just be grinding for 2-ish years, 2.5 years max. And if you go to an entrepreneur and say, hey, can you grind for 2.5 years?
That's it.
Yeah, most of them will be like, that's it? Like, that doesn't sound so bad. So that was one of the perspectives I had, was like, look, man, I mean, I consider myself like an experienced entrepreneur. I can grind for 2.5 years. I mean, you know, now it would turn out it was a totally different kind of grind, you know, so it required all these learnings and adaptations. It became much more personal than I'd imagined, honestly, which, by the way, I think happens in most good businesses. But I just want to suggest to folks that even though, in my opinion, Nick did something very, very outstanding and admirable by pushing through 5 years of it being a not great business, thinking he could actually change the law.
Delusional enough to think that.
Yeah, and yet it happened. He freaking did it. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to follow and subscribe. So this law passes, gets refined, and now you're good to go starting 2021. What are some of the businesses that have come through Wefunder that you're particularly proud of, or you'd like to point to? Because we all have poster children.
Yeah, I mean, there's two different kinds. There's the names that people might have heard of, like Substack, as part of their Series B. But I think the ones I really appreciate are the much earlier stage ones that really no one's ever heard of.
I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
Like, you're a man after my own heart. So when you say things people have never heard of, is it actually a neighborhood coffee shop in some cases?
Yeah, we do a fair number of those. One of my favorite stories is in North Dakota on a reservation for the Lakota tribe, which is like one of the poorest areas of the country. This group of elders came together and made a bison fruit jerky bar based on like a few 100-year-old native recipe called Tonka. And then they sold it to like in Whole Foods, Trader Joe's. And being involved in that was like also pretty inspiring.
So it doesn't need to be a massive amount of money or a massive business venture. If I want to start a coffee shop, I can raise $10,000-$15,000 on Wefunder. That's allowed.
With exceptions, our minimum usually is $50,000. I'd like to bring that lower, but as little as 50 and as much as 5 million.
Just total sidebar. I'm a big believer in bison. I had a bison burger a while ago. I was like, this is delicious. And then I know there are a series of bison entrepreneurs. So I hope that bison snack
it was pretty good.
Well. Do you sample a lot of the the products?
Not too many. We've had a fair number of alcohol companies send us free samples, but...
Free samples. Look up Wefunder's address. So the minimum capital raise threshold is typically $50,000, but the typical minimum that any individual can raise can invest is $100.
Yeah, $100 minimum.
And are there legal limits on what someone can invest?
Yeah, there's a legal maximum per year. It's a pretty complicated formula. The regulation is a little messed up, but if you make more than $100,000 or have a net worth over $100,000, it is the 10% of the greater one per year. If either of those numbers are less than $100,000, it's 5%.
This is so interesting. So legally, you can invest 5% of your income or your net worth unless you're making over $100,000 or you have $100,000 in assets, and then it goes up to 10%. So that means that if I'm a person who makes $50,000, the government has said you can invest up to $2,500 a year. And now, is the $2,500 a year project specific or across projects? In other words,
across all companies.
Across all companies.
Yeah.
And is it across all companies, really, regardless of the method? So that's not a Wefunder thing. That's just
Yeah, legally speaking, across all companies that use regulation crowdfunding.
Okay. See that this is what I wanted to know, is what the thresholds were. So you can't invest. I definitely shouldn't say give because a lot of the times this is an extraordinary way to get in on an early stage business that typically people don't have access to, and you can invest up to 10% of your net worth or your income if either of those is above six figures. Now, people pitch me on things all the time, and they'll sometimes send me a Wefunder link and say, or a campaign, and say, hey, check it out. And then there's information on that company that's on the site. I feel like that's the way I interact with Wefunder. Are there people who just hang out on Wefunder and like look at different companies, or is it that because you can do that?
Yeah. Well, typically about half the money comes from the company's own community, their own customers and users, but then the other half comes from Wefunder. And so we do have some super users who literally look at every single company on the platform.
That is so fun. Are you personally allowed to invest? Is it a situation where you like it? But if you did, would it seem somehow like you're favoring one?
Yeah, the ironic part of this is that I lobbied Congress to pass this law because I personally wanted to invest, but the officers of the platform are not allowed to invest.
Oh, it's fine, man. I ran an entrepreneurship organization and was barred from investing in anything, in part because this is like a little bit of inside baseball, but it might entertain you, is that as soon as you invest in one thing, then all the others will be like, why didn't he invest in this one?
Yeah.
So you have like a strange signaling effect, and then people will will make more out of whatever decision you make.
Yep.
So the minimum is 50,000, and what is the most that has been raised?
Through regulation crowdfunding, the maximum is $5 million, which is allowed to be raised. We've had some companies raise more than that by doing a parallel offering from accredited investors that I think has raised like $12 million.
Super exciting that you actually can get to that scale. I'm curious. So you had this explosion since 2021. As far as I can tell, the space just keeps on growing and growing. What are your obstacles or hurdles you need to overcome in order to grow further? Because I'm sure if I'm Nick, I'm thinking this is the future of entrepreneurship, of capital raising. We're democratizing access to these cool companies and capital. And most people don't know that they can raise money this way, can invest in this way. It's more fun. It's more equitable. We're just scratching the surface. As a startup CEO, I'm sure you're waking up thinking, okay, like we have to get to this level. We have to do this. What are the things that you feel are standing in the way of this being utilized to its fullest potential?
Yeah, one of them is making it part of the conventional wisdom or the new normal, so to speak, that every company along the way should reserve a small part of their round for their own users and customers to invest.
Wow.
So, of course, take Sequoia's money, but just reserve, 1% of that round so that your earliest supporters can invest alongside you.
It's a great idea.
And from 2016 to 2020, the laws weren't great. And so there's like this little bit of stigma of a company using, regulation crowdfunding. It's like, ooh, maybe they're too desperate. Then when the laws got reformed, we had, Substack, Mercury, Replit, venture-backed unicorns actually do this. And every single time we do that, that changes the narrative. Because it should be prestigious to build something that where your customers actually are demanding to invest. Like that should be seen as like a mark of prestige. And so over time,
like a mark of adoption and consumer loyalty and love.
So I think like ultimately we hope to get a world where the customers of a startup are demanding that they have the right to invest alongside Sequoia or Andreessen Horowitz.
So does that mean that you spend time talking to startup CEOs saying, hey guys, like why don't you reserve a bit of equity for your customers?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not because they need some founders obviously need money. If you want to open your coffee shop, you must need money. The paradox, though, is that the highest growth companies don't need the money, but then we would like to basically democratize access to that company and let their normal users invest alongside that. And for those kinds of founders, it's like really just about like doing the right thing by their earliest users and basically having more brand loyalty.
Hey all, if you know me, you know I'm not that handy in the kitchen, and I have become a huge believer and booster of Factor. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating a joy. It's so fast, you just pop that thing 2 minutes later, and you are eating a restaurant-quality, healthy meal, making you feel excellent about yourself. My favorite is the turkey chili with zucchini, and there is so much more to choose from. You never get tired of it. It fits any budget. It's fast, healthy. It is going to be the new Factor in your life. Yes, I'm a fan. Head to factormeals.com/yang50 and use code yang50 to get 50% off your first box and 2 free wellness shots per box while subscription is active. That's code yang50 at factormeals.com/yang50 to get 50% off your first box. Get Factor today. It's going to change the way you eat. Okay, so obstacle one is companies may not make it available as often as they should. And what you said about the stigma is fascinating and interesting. Because in like you do kind of mentally segment ways of raising money into crowdfunding and institutional.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying is this should be
Do both.
Yeah. This should be in parallel.
Yeah.
So hurdle number one is convincing venture-backed companies and the like that you should do this as a supplement.
Yeah.
Is there an obstacle on because so at least in my mind's eye, there's probably an issue around folks realizing that this is a totally different way to get exposure. I had lunch today with a guy. It's like a successful finance guy. And he said, it's like, hey, I keep investing in the same types of things over and over again because that's what he sees. And then he said, I'd like to invest in something I know is just totally non-correlated to the rest of my stuff because, people just pitch me the same stuff, the same industry. Now, I did not, to my detriment, I did not say, hey, you check out Wefunder. Like, you just like get in on all sorts of companies. But I feel like there is like an awareness issue on that side as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess one of the strengths of Wefunder is that we're incredibly diverse from like an ostrich farm to like a fusion reactor. And when you're investing your own money and it's, a small amount, like $100, and you see a fusion reactor by, a mad scientist, like you're allowed to do that with your own money. We have a lot of investors that it's an investment. They would like the chance of earning a return, but they can see it almost like a lottery ticket. It's like chances of the fusion reactor actually working pretty low, but like the scientist has like got like, I don't know, a record for the most highest temperature for a privately funded reactor. Like, let's give them a shot.
Well, and what you're suggesting is something I just spoke about over the same lunch, which is you want to get your money back and have it grow if you can. But there are times when you invest for a mixture of motivations. Mm-hmm. One reason here I'll say it's like I've invested in some things. And I'm just going to tell you and anyone listening. So number one is definitely relationships. Like if a friend comes to me and it's like, hey, I'm doing this thing, then I feel somewhat obligated to invest because you're a friend. There was a time not that long ago where I even said, it's like, look, I don't think you figured out a lot of stuff. There's a lot but this is someone who had really, really gone to bat for me and contributed a lot of value over the course of our working together and career together. I owed him. So I was like, I'm going to have to do something for you here because I'm like, I consider myself a non-jerk. By the way, there are people who invest in different principles. I mean, there are some people who would just be like, I will not invest if, like I don't think I'm going to get my money back. Like that. There have been times where I've invested out of relationships. So I'm just going to say relationships is one. Another thing, at least for me, and this is a little bit what you're describing with the reactors, is learning.
Mm-hmm.
Is sometimes that some people will say it's like, look, I just want to find out more about this space, this industry, this team, and that can go back to relationships. But one of the fun things about Wefunder would be you put in $100 and then you get updates from this team, and we're all busy. But if you even put a tiny bit of skin in the game, then all of a sudden you'll become part of that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that drives me with Wefunder the most is, I think the most powerful thing in someone's life is when someone believes in you and then like backs it up by like investing in you.
Totally.
Which is like a kind of a self-fulfilling cycle.
Oh, it's beautiful.
So like scaling that out. And I think the best angel investors, like obviously they would like to earn a return, but I think they have another reason in addition to that. Maybe it's supporting their friends or someone they believe in, or maybe it's helping be part of this story, how to change the world in one way, whether it be a fusion reactor or just even a coffee shop in their local community.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. I've been a mattress guy since my 20s because I always figured if you're going to do something for almost a third of your life, you should try and do it right, that anything you invest in a mattress, you'll get back many times over in terms of health, energy, and productivity. But Helix Sleep wasn't around way back then. I really wish it were. Imagine getting a personalized mattress shipped straight to your door, free of charge. Just take the Helix Sleep quiz. I was matched with a Dawn mattress because I wanted something that felt firm, and I sleep on my back. Now, how do you sleep? Go to the Helix Sleep quiz. Tell them, and then you can get a mattress sent to your door for a 100-night free trial, I know, with a 10 or 15-year warranty. Don't take my word for it. Helix has been awarded the #1 mattress pick by GQ and Wired magazine. Helix is offering up to 30% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang. That's helixsleep.com/yang. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. Well, and the third category I'm going to say is just, you really want to see someone take a shot at solving that problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if it's a problem you care about, and be like, oh, I'm really glad someone's trying to do that, so let's go. I'll give you a random example. I tweeted something a little while ago about scientists working on trying to freeze glaciers in place. Did you see this Atlantic article?
I haven't. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a scientist who determined that there might be a way to get glaciers not to collapse if you could drill holes so that things freeze into place instead of warming.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at that and said, okay, what is the problem they're trying to solve? And the problem they're trying to solve is that there's a massive glacier that if it fell into the ocean would raise sea levels by 10 feet. And I was like, what is the approximate societal harm of like a 10-foot level sea rise? And I'd like, your mind breaks you and trying to think about it. So the scientists' plan now is getting more attention and support. Anyone who wants to look this up, it was if you just Google the Atlantic iceberg climate change, it'll pop up. But I thought, wow, I'm so glad that someone's working on that.
Yeah.
And this is something that I have done in the past, where it's like, if someone comes to me with, it's like, oh, I really want someone to take a shot at solving the problem. Sometimes you're allowed to care and invest accordingly if it's not going to hurt you if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in the ingenuity of humans to tackle huge problems like climate change. And having Wefunder be able to help fund those things, I think, is pretty important. So
I just wanted to head in this direction. So the scientific research I just described, I don't think they have a for-profit company around that. I mean, there are PhDs running around the Arctic and whatnot. I've started businesses. I've started nonprofits. I've started political campaigns. Wefunder is just for-profit businesses.
Yeah, I mean, GoFundMe is great for a nonprofit, but I guess fundamentally, I'm a capitalist. I'm a big believer in the free market, and I'm a big believer in investing in for-profit companies that are highly motivated to change the world. and what they believe is a better way.
Yeah. So my perspective on this, and people who listen to me a lot know this. So first, love startups, love entrepreneurship, love businesses. I think Wefunder is awesome. I think people investing in businesses in their communities, we should be doing more of it. I think this should become much more of like an asset class or investment class that people take advantage of if you happen to, have. So what my rich finance friend was saying is that, look, you have a portfolio, it's in the stock market, and then people just run around looking for hedges.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this might be that. Like if you can find businesses that are, it's like their success or failure is not going to rise and fall with the stock market. So I'm a huge fan of all those things. There are lots of problems that businesses can solve. And then there are problems that businesses aren't a great fit for. Mm-hmm. And you need more of everything. Like you need more small business, particularly small businesses, because I came up as a small business guy. I love small businesses. Mm-hmm. And then there are problems that government should theoretically be solving, like climate change for the most part. I mean, they're for-profit companies.
But despite the fact that they're really not, like we've actually made pretty massive progress without like much government intervention. Like cost of solar panels, I find it like amazing how much like just normal people have adapted on their own initiative without having government.
I mean, there have been massive subsidies towards,
but not as much as there should have been.
Solar. Yeah, I mean, I like it's like there are government scale problems, there are nonprofit problems, and then there are enterprise problems. In my opinion, we're not doing a great job. We're not doing as good a job as we could in any of those domains. I'm excited, especially for small businesses, because I think what's happening in the business context is that you have this increasingly consolidating landscape in a lot of our biggest industries. So finance would be one, which again, Wefunder is kind of an antidote to, because in the day you had community banks. In the, like yesteryear, you might even had a community bank and small businesses and the rest of it.
And they actually might have known you. Like one analogy I use is like, we're kind of bringing humanity back to capitalism a little bit. Like now some, Wall Street bank might have like some kind of algorithm where your local community like banker has to use. But, back in the day, like, Joe and Fred and Jill, who actually knew you, could use that as part of their criteria, whether or not they want to invest in you.
Oh, yeah. There used to be many, many more community banks and regional banks. Yeah. Like there's been massive consolidation in that industry over the last number of years. And I'm not sure it's been great for some person who wants to start a coffee shop, who's suggesting it probably has not been great. Mm-hmm. And then you have tech as another one where, a lot of these industries are consolidating. And even if you start a company, now your highest opportunity is to sell to the big guys. It's not to become the big guy. Because, it's like the odds of you becoming the big guy, like the odds were low before, but at least it was somewhat realistic. And then now it's, like not even on the table.
Yeah. And also the talent being sucked up by the big guys.
Yeah, totally. You live in Silicon Valley now, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you see this all the time. So trying to bring resources to smaller, nimble enterprise at the local level, I think is extraordinarily positive.
And I think it's beyond just the capital. Like, I mean, money is like, in one way, the most important thing, but also almost the least important thing.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think a lot of it is
Say more.
I mean, it could be like at a broader level, like the community coming together to actually believe in you. Part of it is even realizing you can do this. Like at the earliest stage, like, I'm a delusional person living in Boston. I'm like, I'm going to go change the law. Then I went and tried to do it.
And after X years, you succeeded.
Yeah, and most people don't even realize it's possible. So even like opening up, their horizons to realize that if they want to have one small coffee shop, they can do that. If they want to open a chain, they can do that also. Like the belief in themselves that they can like impact the world as they want, I think is the most important thing.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. How did you choose which internet service provider to use? The sad thing is, most of us didn't have much of a choice because ISPs operate a lot like monopolies in the regions that they serve. They then use this monopoly position to take advantage of customers, and yes, they even sell your data, your activities to advertisers and big tech companies, and you don't see a dime. That's why I protect my internet surfing and devices with ExpressVPN. When you use ExpressVPN, it's like a magic portal to a perfectly safe and anonymous internet. And don't take my word for it. This is the #1 VPN service according to CNET. It's used by major companies all over the world. So stop handing over your personal data to ISPs and other tech companies who then mine your activity and sell off your information. Protect yourself with a VPN I trust to keep my privacy online. Visit expressvpn.com/yang. That's expressvpn.com/yang to get 3 extra months free. Go to expressvpn.com/yang right now to learn more. You went to Babson, which is a very, very entrepreneurial culture, probably inculcated this in you somewhat. And I think this is one reason I love Wefunder. I think entrepreneurship is one of the answers to what plagues us. And a lot of entrepreneurship is that belief, and that commitment. You wake up and you say, you know what, I'm going to tackle this problem. And if you come back X years from now, I'll still be here trying to tackle the problem, in part because I believe I can change it. And so this goes back to what you were saying about how money is the most important thing, but the least important thing. And so the most important thing is people. And if you have the right people, they will get the money. Yeah. Because the money will say, oh my gosh, you're the right person trying to do this thing. I'm going to make money. If I give you, or if I invest some of my money in you. And then the reverse is true too, is that if you have the wrong people, you can shove money in their face. It's not going to work. Yeah. You get the right people, the right team, the right culture. And even if they start with a crummy idea, if you have the right people, they'll be like, you know what? Turns out that the coffee shop is not the right move. It turns out it's this bakery, or it turns out it's
just adapt.
It's this other thing. This is one of the things that I fear about American life right now. It's almost a spiritual thing. Check it out. So I think that human capital, intellectual capital, social capital is much more important than financial capital, because if you have these things, you can get the financial capital. But I feel like now in American life, things are getting a little bit out of whack, where we're financializing things more and more, and it's so this confidence I have isn't as rock solid as it was. That if you have the right stuff, the resources will be there for you.
I still have the confidence. I think a lot about the venture model, for instance. Venture capitalists make 2 and 20, which largely means they're incentivized to raise very large funds. They can earn 2% management fees each year, and they're incentivized to want to invest larger amounts of money into startups. And I often think one of the key things that can blow up a company is accepting a lot of money when you haven't quite figured it out yet. And I think money actually slows you down. It requires you to hire more people, spend money in less wise ways.
I talked about I won't leave the company name out, but it was a company that was very successful outside of Silicon Valley. And then a big Silicon Valley VC said, hey, we're going to put $50 million into you, but you have to move here to San Francisco, and then you have to try and grow like mad. And in this particular case, it did not work. Yeah. But from the VC's perspective, they're not there to hit anything but a home run.
Because, or a grand slam.
Yeah, a grand slam. Because their one grand slam will make up for any of the not so great outcomes. So there's a particular model that works for that form of investment that was not the right fit for that company. That company, if they had just, by the way, this company was profitable, growing, etc. But because they tried to do this hyper growth model, it ended up it would not the ideal outcome, honestly. And part of it too is if you adopt a hyper growth and you hire a bunch of people on, then they're all saying, okay, we're here for the hyper growth. And if you don't have the hyper growth, then those people will move on. And so you wind up with unhappy investors, unhappy team, like because you were trying to. And so people listening to this might think like, aren't we all just supposed to hit grand slams all the time?
We're all trying.
But the truth is that there are different opportunities for different types of orgs, and that some orgs should 100% be trying to hit a single. and if you're trying to hit a single and I arrive and be like, here's $20 million, you'd be like, wait a minute, like what's going on? And then you have to try and shift everything into becoming, like a power hitter when like turns out that you're someone who gets on base and, walks and hits singles.
Well, I think the more dangerous thing is that, okay, so venture capital might be a good fit for maybe like 20 companies per year. When the companies
that's the message.
Have actually they figured it out. They actually need the money to grow fast. Like there are places where it fits very, very well. And there's probably another couple thousand companies that think they have that and actually don't.
Sure.
They're not trying to hit a single. They're trying to hit the grand slam, and they've deluded themselves that they are ready for $50 million. And the money is an answer to their problems, but actually it makes it harder. And venture capital is an accelerant to an amazing success or blowing up your company.
Well, so this conversation speaks to, so one of the problems in American life, in my opinion now, that I do see Wefunder as an antidote to this, is the financialization of a lot of things in American life. I can use like entertainment or media culture as an example. It's like there might have been a time when you and I were growing up where, you'd have creatives, they do this, they do that. And then eventually it's like, wait a minute, like, hey, it turns out there are only two types of movies that make money.
Let's do those over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's like let's budget you to death with these types of movies. You're like, and so then you can end up sanding down creativity in a particular way. Social media, it's like, hey, what content's going to get me a lot of attention? It's like, oh, let me do more of that, and so so we're financializing things, and what you want to do is you want to humanize it. You want to have companies that are operating at a human scale in communities. You want scrappy entrepreneurs in town to be able to raise $50K for that business, not need a mega bank or whatnot. So I see Wefunder as on the positive side of this equation of trying to rehumanize our economy. I sense that that this is pretty aligned with what you'd like to see happen.
Oh, that's why I created Wefunder. For me, it's all about the relationship between the founder and investors. That's what drives the platform. That's what I actually care about, the people to people.
That's lovely and beautiful. Hey, deep question. Does Wefunder have a Wefunder campaign for Wefunder?
Yes, we have close to 10,000 investors.
Yay!
We've funded Wefunder pretty much only on Wefunder.
Wow. Isn't that awesome? What a model. They're eating their own cooking. They're cooking their own cooking. Nick, huge fan of what you're building. I think that Wefunder is still really just scratching the surface of its potential as a way to democratize entrepreneurship, fundraising. Count me as a fan and admirer. How can people get involved on any level with Wefunder, and how can they keep up with you?
For Wefunder, just go to wefunder.com and sign up for an account. For me, my email is nick@wefunder.com. Just send me an email.
That's a real entrepreneur, people. He gave you his real email address. I can attest that is his email address because I have emailed Nick. Nick, congratulations on building an enterprise that I think people don't realize just how much it is transforming things now, but even its potential to transform things in the future, to have an economy that we're actually more excited about.
Well, thank you for having me on.